Welcome to Run, Build, Grow, the podcast that laces up its running shoes and dives deep into the heartbeat of the communal spirit of running. I'm your host, Andrew Ware, the RunninRev, and I'm thrilled to take you on this exhilarating journey where we explore stories that go beyond the pavement. Here in this episode, we welcome Allison Xanthopoulos, who is joining us from sort of the middle point between Northern Virginia and the Richmond area. She is someone that I have met through church stuff that I do as a pastor, but also brings this amazing and awesome perspective of coming to running during the pandemic. I talk about it all the time of this running boom that is happening. And Allison is an example of someone who has found running and found a love for running, a joy for running, and a community in running through the pandemic. And so this is an awesome opportunity to connect and to hear Allison's story as we learn more and more what community can do for us, what it looks like for us to be a part of community, even when we don't necessarily think we're often the fastest or the strongest or anything like that. And so we hear this story. So let's dive into this story with Allison. All right, we are joined by Allison today. Allison, how are you doing?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well. Down here in the 757, it's starting to cool off. The humidity is not as oppressive as it has been. Hopefully the swamp that is Northern Virginia is treating you pretty okay.
Yeah, I'm 540, so kind of middle of the state, but
okay. All right, that's not as bad. Not as bad. But
it was a little warm out there this morning, but
yeah. Allison and I connected through the church. And Allison's story is one that is quite interesting. But before we really jump into that, and where your running journey started, Allison, what is your community and what makes your community awesome?
Ooh, great question. My community is evolved over the course of my church going and now like running. And that has been its own journey, which is awesome. Because it's like I always knew runners but I didn't run. And so like I was left out of that. But then as I started getting into that, it's like, oh yeah, there's all these people running. And like, I don't know, it was interesting to be part of that. And then, just a lot more people in the local community here in Fredericksburg I've gotten to know. So yeah, it's exciting.
And from your Instagram, it looks like, you're getting out there, you're joining multiple groups and you are getting these miles in, which I think especially during these summer months is one of the hardest things. I talked about it in the episode with Amanda. That's, we're recording this before that episode comes out, but Amanda and I talk about, summer running and just the slog of it.
It is a slog.
What's it been like for the motivation to be there from community to help get you out on that run when it is, in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and even the humidity, like the dew point is up that high too. And so you immediately know, what's that motivation been like for you in these summer months to get out there, to get those miles in? And what role has community played in that?
Yeah, that's been quite an interesting thing because I was able to, in the fall and winter, build the habit of certain times of day and certain days of the week that I just went on a run with a group. And so And those times don't change because of the group. So I just decided early on, like, I know it's going to be bad, but I've gotten used to like just being sweaty. And I used to hate being sweaty. And now it's just like, well, you're going to get sweaty on a run anyways, like no matter the weather, right? Even in the winter, when you have to layer up, you within that first mile, you're starting to sweat and you're like, and then you just come home and all your clothes are soaking. But if that's going to happen anyway, I might as well just like grin and bear it and get out there. So And if you want, if you're trying to put in long runs, long miles, which I'm trying to do every week to 2 weeks, I do like 9 to 10 miles or a little bit more, and I just go early before like the sun. So I've started, a 10-mile run at 6 a.m., 5:30. So just yeah, and all those big runs I have done with people.
Mhm.
So it is a great motivation to know that you're not going to be alone for this. Somebody else is there slugging it out with you.
And I mean, I think that there's a lot to that. Even when you recognize, I was talking to one of my athletes the other day and he was asking about long runs and like, all right, well, what does the long run look like? Like, what is my pace? And he's kind of getting into this whole half marathon thing. He's like, well, can I walk? And I'm like, dude, like long run is meant to like teach your body about time. Like
Yep.
in half marathons and full marathons, right? You're out there for a long amount of time. Your body doesn't understand mileage at all. It understands what your heart rate is and it understands time. And so the longer that your heart is kind of working under stressed conditions, you know, depending on what those stress conditions look like is what's going to help build that aerobic base. And so, I told him, I'm like, make your long run what it needs to be so that you can have the time out there. If I say like 5-6 miles, you kind of have in your mind that that's going to be about an hour or so, depending on
At
your
least.
pace, like probably a little bit more than an hour. And
Yep.
so if you're going to be out there for an hour, it's like, what do you need to do? And I know for me, a lot of times, one of the things I love to do, especially once I start getting into double digit miles of half marathon training, it's like, man, just someone to talk to for a lot of that, just someone to
Oh,
have
yeah.
conversation with.
That took me a little while to figure out too, because initially my, cardio level really wasn't up to trying to run as hard as I wanted to and be able to talk. And now, like, it's kind of evened out where I know I can talk at this pace. Okay, I can't talk at this pace. And that's probably too hard for a sustained level of, mileage. So, yeah, I make sure that, and, like with training, you shouldn't be like, most of your 80% of your training really should be within a talkable pace, right? Like you
Yeah.
shouldn't be pushing so hard that you can't talk. So yeah, but that's taken me a while to learn. I did not do that initially starting out running. I always wanted to push, push, push. So
Well, then let's get in the time machine for a second and let's see like where this has come from. So what has the journey of Allison the runner been? And I think it was you and I that had this conversation back and forth of, calling yourself a runner. And of course there's a lot of, feelings that come into that. But what has your journey as a runner looked like for you?
yeah, that's so a lot of people ask me like, how did you get into this? And I really do not have a good why, other than COVID was not kind to like my weight, right? Probably a lot of people's, and like,
Yeah.
and it really just crept up, and I wasn't doing a whole lot. And then I had a friend who was interested or taught dance fitness, and I knew about that, and but I didn't know that they were streaming classes during COVID, and then it was only after, like, as we're kind of coming out of COVID, that I got doing the dance classes online. So that helped a little bit with both like my fitness level, but then like the habit of something. And so I started doing like those classes every day. And then I mixed in like weight training because they had
Mhm.
different types of classes, not just dance. Um, and so I kind of like got going on that, and I knew that person. And then I was able to go to classes in person once they opened the studio back up, because I'm in Fredericksburg, but that studio they were based out of is in Richmond. So I would go down sometimes with her when she was teaching and just go to that in person. And really just that group, like that energy, and dance has always been fun for me. I still love to dance. But it didn't feel like a workout. You're
Yeah.
like, you're getting it, but it's not, it's like you're a backup dancer. So, and then from there, I can't really explain how the running started other than I would put in my old neighborhood, I would put one of my kids on the bus, and I had like an hour time period between it when I had to get my other kid ready for school. And my old neighborhood had this 1 mile loop, and I was like, I'm going to walk it every day. So I'd put him on the bus, I'd walk it, and I started doing that every day because I had the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I started also at the same time, and people say to not do this, but I did it anyway, which is start a fitness thing and start nutrition and right? But I did.
Come on, Allison.
I have a tendency to kind of like go all in on something. So I started the walking, and I also started really dialing in my nutrition and watching what I ate, and I track it. And I still to this day track it. And so eventually I got to the point where I was like, I could jog this mile. And so but I did it on interval, and it was super slow. Like I would even just be like, okay, I'm going to jog to the next mailbox. Okay. And then I would walk for 2 minutes, and then I would jog again, so that was slow. But then the two things combined, and I walked other times of the day. Like I mostly work at home for my job, and I could get out in the middle of the day for like a lunchtime walk. Right. So I would run, jog in the morning, and then walk in the afternoon, and then maybe walk again in the evening with my kids. So those three things, okay, there's 3 miles, right, in the day. And I was watching my nutrition. So long story short, I just had this huge weight drop, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like within a year, I was down like 70 pounds. And that's a combination of lots of factors, right? The main one was nutrition, but the big one was adding this exercise consistently every day. I did not skip a day. Like even when I ended up with COVID, eventually I was out there running 2 miles. And I know that's hardcore, but like, yeah. And I really started posting about it too.
Mm-hmm.
Like I posted pictures, and I posted my, I just started posting, and that held me accountable. Like if I don't have something to post, I didn't do it. Right.
Yeah.
So, and other people would tell me, oh, I saw your post again. You're inspiring me to get out there, And so like, it was this positive feedback of, oh, and I know looks aren't everything, but that was also something. Like my looks changed dramatically because of the weight, because of just being more healthy in general. So there was a lot of like positive feedback loop going. The weight dropped. I look better. I feel better, all these things. And then I was like, and then I had these running friends already who were into it, and they kind of like pushed me to, okay, let's add mileage. Let's do a 5K. Let's whatever. So, one of the friend I just ran with this morning is the first one I ever ran a 5K distance with. And she's like, oh, I know I'm super slow compared to you now because I have like surpassed what she has been able to do or had the motivation to do. But yeah, I don't know. So it just kind of built from there. And then I got into these local running groups and built that consistency and, added miles, did a training group for the historic half marathon in May. And that really helped push because there was no way when I was doing a mile on intervals that I thought I could run 13 miles. Absolutely not. And so, but then, and even just like the double digit miles was a huge, thing. So, but that training group, we're running like 7 miles and then 8 miles the next week and then 10 miles. And then but you had the accountability of the group and a person that was pacing us. So they're like, and everybody's so encouraging. It wasn't like, oh, you're not going fast enough. Like there was a lot of, just really positive stuff. I don't know.
Well, and it sounds like from your journey that it's like a bunch of different steps that take place in a certain order, right? And I think a lot of listeners can probably empathize and understand a lot of that, especially from this perspective that you're kind of that example of what this new, I call it the roaring 20s running boom looks like. Because it is like you had the folks who during COVID, like, what are we doing? And there's really that intentionality of, making sure we're active. And it's something that we're thinking about because we're not going places as much, right? We're in the house more. We have to work remotely. We can't be places. And so it changes that mindset. And even more so of looking at of the acknowledgement of what would it mean for me to be a healthier person. I think a lot of times we may get lost in the weight aspect of it, but even more so the focus on, I want to be healthier and what that means for us physically, mentally, emotionally, and then
Absolutely
looking at the role of community that is played for it. And I love this point of because I've tried to get better at it, and I always struggle, but using social media as an accountability tool, and what has been your line to distinguish using social media as an accountability tool versus like the humble brag? Because I think that a lot of folks can get down that rabbit hole, or even folks that we're talking to and in community with is like, you do a 10-mile run and you want to post about it, not necessarily to brag, but just to say, man, I got active today. I love doing it. So for you, what is that line between social accountability and maybe like that humble brag kind of mentality that can almost become toxic in our society?
Right. I think I don't overthink that, right? Like I'm just posting because now it's a habit, much like logging my food, much like, oh, I'm going to go on a run today. Like it's a thing that I like know. It's almost just part of the process of like, okay, I did this and now I'm going to post about it because like, again, that's like an accountability thing. Like if I don't have something to post, then I didn't do anything. Like, and I have only ever had one person say something, kind of silly negative where it was like, well, you can work out without posting it. And I was like, yeah, but a majority of people, right, that have seen it, that see it, that like have said how inspiring that is. And that it makes them want to get up off the couch. It makes them want to, oh my gosh, she just ran 9 miles. Like I can at least go out and walk a mile, And so I try to hold on to like that it's not really about necessarily like how I might be making someone else feel or not feel, but how I feel about it. And that I just post because I like it, because I want to, because I'm proud of that workout, because I'm proud of that pace I hit or whatever, Yeah.
And so what does it look like for the community that's supporting you in that? Whether it's those who are local, who are, they not only see what you post on social media, but they see you in person. And then also those who are supporting you from afar. I see a lot of the stuff that you put on Instagram, and it's great because it's motivating and, the grit and determination. And so what's that like receiving that sort of input from others? And how are you translating that to not just your own, pushing forward, but also helping to encourage others in that as well?
Right. I don't get too much feedback, honestly, other than like some likes or some just reactions or like I think I did much earlier on, but now people are kind of like, oh, that's her normal. So it's not as shocking when you see like, oh, she went on a 10-mile run on a Saturday, like that's just my like standard, thing. I do try to think about how I vary what I post and not just like, oh, this is my run and here's how I looked that day, or I'm all sweaty, because I do want people to know that like it's okay if you're not doing 10 miles, but did you get out? Did you hit some steps today? Did you know what I mean? Like, and have to I have to moderate that in myself too, because one of the goals I tried to hit early on, and of course, now when you run 10 miles, you're hitting a lot of steps really early on, but is a 10,000 step a day goal.
Yeah.
And that's and for some people that's a huge number, but I made sure early on that like, okay, maybe I'm not going to run 10 miles. I'm going to do 2 miles. I'm going to do 1 mile walking. But what else did I do that added up to 10,000 steps?
Mm-hmm.
So that, and now my daughter's like, why do you even have that step goal? Because I'm just like, I just hit that. I mean, when you run 10 miles, you're at 20,000 steps, like right off the bat. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah. I think it's just keeping in mind that everyone's fitness goals are different, and the community I have grown into here is super supportive. Like I have found individuals and groups that are always not necessarily pushing you, but like, oh, I know you can do this. Like the first time I did, so there's a local running club that I joined, and Fredericksburg area running club, and they have a Saturday group run every Saturday, and it's a 6 mile loop.
Mm-hmm.
And before I had ever tried that, I was like, oh, I don't think I can do 6 miles. Like that sounds really far. But I had made friends with this one guy, and he's like, you can do it. I will stick with you the whole time. And he did. And like, I did much better than I ever even thought because I had someone supporting me the whole time. So now that I am to a point where not just I want to be, but I feel good at, I try to do that for other people. So it's really just like a, good cycle passing down the good energy.
And what was the desire for you to start doing, run clubs, to start getting out there and being a part of the community? Because, I have to imagine that in getting involved in those, that it's not necessarily an easy decision because, even you putting stuff online, there's still always that like, force field of I don't actually have to see the person who might like, call me a bad word or, think that I'm a terrible person. And there's a vulnerability of getting involved in, that that style of community. And so what
Sure.
was the draw for you to want to get and go to, some of these run clubs and engage in person with a lot of these people?
So before I ever even went to even one run, I didn't know anybody in it. I had just heard about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that they had this Friday morning, early in the morning run that they at the time called No Drop, right? Which was we're gonna run the base was like 3 miles of a 5K and at the slowest person's pace. So
Okay.
and it's evolved a little bit because that's uh easy to say and hard to do in theory. In like it's easy in theory, it's hard to do when you do have people show up that are really serious runners and always hitting like 7.5 minute miles or something. But like for them to try to slow down to somebody's pace that's a new runner is difficult. And you find that out later, but that anyways, I just showed up to that, having messaged the girl that kind of started it and said, "Hey, I'm going to show up. I don't know if I can do it." And she was super encouraging and just said, it'll be fine. We all stick together. And it was difficult the first couple of times because there's on this route, there's like 2 hills. And I was really beat by the end of those 3 miles. But then, like, I just kept going, and people were nice in the group, and they did stick together. And I'm pretty friendly, so I was willing to just kind of talk to people on the run or after the run. Oh, and they stay after for coffee, and I love coffee. So they would go to this coffee shop that's right across the street from where they met. And that was an intentional location choice too on behalf of the leadership. So you kind of get to know people, and so from there, and that group was an offshoot really of this bigger running club. And it was just an extra run during the week. So from there, I decided to go to the Saturday run. And now, like, I have developed and kept going a Wednesday morning girls run. And like, so it's a small community, but it's big, and you're always meeting people. And yeah, I don't know.
Well, and I mean, I think that, what listeners can hear and understand is there's a big difference between, how we interact with community. And there are things that we get from social media. There are things that we get from digital community, and there's things that we can get from in-person community. And acknowledging what those are helps us to grow, right? I think that there is so much that we can get from the digital community, from, like stuff like this podcast, like, from Instagram and other social media. There's a lot that can be gleaned from that. And then there's also a lot that can be gleaned from intentional physical community as well. And when we engage in both of those and we see what both of those are doing for sort of our mental health, our emotional health, and our physical health, what does that mean for us, and how do we engage? And then even how does that impact how we're engaging with the things that we love? And so what have you noticed about your running since you've not just been on this journey, but since you've interacted in these multiple different ways throughout community? What have you noticed about your running in that time?
That's a good question. I have noticed that I appreciate the community aspect of it more than I thought. I want that and need that more than I thought I did when I first started. And even though I first started running, just a mile on my own, but then anything over that I was doing with people. I always I had a couple girlfriends that like, every week for a while when we would run on a Thursday, and we would run, together, and it was another form of no drop, right? Where we were kind of just running at like the easiest pace. And that really developed my sense of while running is like a very individual sport, it doesn't have to be. Yeah. And you can still have that time together. And I mean, we talk about like a lot of life stuff, and we all like went to the same church too. So that was helping with like a form of connection. But I think that it's just another way to help you stay motivated with like the fitness, and just like, because even on like, if one of us we meet up on this run, but maybe one of them didn't go to church on Sunday, and then it's like, oh well, are we going to see you on the next run? So it gets encouraging overall. And so now I even do that in the running club runs, right? I'll say, to somebody, send them a message. Hey, missed you on the Friday run. Hey, missed you, and it's like, it's a way to stay connected through these positive things.
And it keeps on becoming so important because we see the after effects of what happens when we're in community together. And I think that's why this podcast means so much is, we never truly see this understanding of, growth and progress until we see it, played out in our communal relational settings, and what it looks like for us to grow. And, just when we compare ourselves, and I mean, this is that like deadly sin of a task, right? Comparing ourselves and not comparing ourselves to anybody but ourselves. But like, I think of who I was, 5 years ago when I reconnected with the communal running scene in Richmond to who I am now, and to see the growth and progress that has taken place in that time and space.
Yeah.
And for someone who picked it up, during COVID, a time when, you're doing it by yourself. I think you've had this opportunity where it's like, all right, I started running. I had to kind of do a lot of stuff virtually and rely on the digital community. Then I was able to kind of come in and find the physical community. So how have you measured growth over this time? And then what are some of the goals that you have as you continue to look forward about how community is impacting you?
Say the first part of the question again.
So what have you seen? What growth have you seen for yourself in this time? And then what are you looking for as what kind of growth are you looking forward to as you continue on this journey?
I mean, definitely personal growth in my measure of accountability to myself, right? Before running and before like the dance fitness and stuff, I probably did not hold myself accountable for consistency. And I can't explain why that changed, but definitely the people helped it, right? Like the check-in of like friends being like, oh, did you get a run today? How was your run? And if I hadn't done it, then, oh, I don't really have anything to report. So that consistency in myself. And now it's just innate. Now it's just like, now I do that for other people. And yeah, so definitely personal growth there. And then the running growth, I mean, I went from running, on interval a mile to having run a half marathon in a year. And I'm gonna less than a year, really. And I am gonna run 2 more half marathons this year. So that's huge. And I now also work on it, right? I work on speed. I work on I haven't worked on, I guess, endurance other than getting up to a half marathon. So I don't know if a marathon's in my future because that's twice the distance.
That's all right. All right. You don't need a marathon.
Don't need a marathon. I just can't. So many people I have talked to recently are like, you should run it. You should run a marathon. And I'm like, but it's 2 times the amount of time and like distance investment. Like, I can't imagine getting to a half marathon distance and then saying, let me do that again. Maybe if you slowed your pace, maybe but I'd have to go real slow. And that's a long haul. I might do it eventually just to check a box. But yeah, I'm excited to see what I'm going to do. I had a really good first half marathon, this challenging one here in Fredericksburg that has hills. And that hospital hill is killer. But it was like better than I ever thought I would do based on training. And I'm excited to see, like, I'm going to run the Richmond half and one in
That'll be an
Raleigh,
awesome
North
race.
Carolina.
Love Richmond.
Yeah.
Let's go, RVA.
Oh,
And to keep that journey going, I think is the other big thing that we talk about, because, you know, one of my fears is that, you know, in light of this running boom of all these people who are getting into running and just the explosion that is happening just all across this, is that it'll fizzle out in like 3 or 4 years. And you know, I love seeing people, you know, involved in this sport that I so love and desire. And it's also just like, I don't care. I don't want to be a gatekeeper, which is why I keep on telling you, Allison, you are a runner. You will always be a runner. Even if you stop running, you are a runner. And because it's so important for that sort of mentality and understanding, and especially even just the movement and the activity as a general broad thing, to think of how an activity like running can functionally transform society and functionally transform community. Because I think we can see, especially where running clubs are gathering, you know, coffee shops, breweries, restaurants, you know, all of these places where it's coming together, and it's not just a run, right? It's a run plus.
yeah.
And to be able to see that keep going, like, I mean, and that's the part that I love to keep seeing is, you know, what is the extension of this community? It doesn't, we know we're not just running together, but we're practicing community together. And so,
Sure.
you know, to see that continue to happen and continue to reach out there, and whether it is in physical or digital spaces, because I think we're learning and seeing, you know, I'm learning in this podcast, like, man, look at this, like, you know, what is it? I just came off of interviewing someone from Texas, from California. Then I come back here to Hampton Roads for a little bit. I go up to Northern Virginia, go into Richmond. It's like, you know, there's all these different communities, and we can learn from one another. And so it's not just the physical, but, you know, even what are some other spaces, and how can this kind of percolate within our communities to be able to continue to help us grow? Because, you know, you look at the growth that you've experienced in the last, you know, 3 or 4 years, and what that looks like to translate that for other folks and what they feel. Yeah. So here we go. Let's hit these end of podcast questions now. What is your favorite distance to run?
Ooh, favorite distance. I have now, so I have a running joke with a couple of friends, is like, oh, it's just a 5K. So, like, you know, a year ago, I like that was like a not a pipe dream. Like, I ran my first like 5K race on Mother's Day, but now that's my standard, is like, and this is funny, is I got added to a Facebook group. So here's another community, is that was 5K a day in May. And so the challenge in this group was add activity that's a 5K worth every day in May. But in May, I was training for that half marathon. So I was easily hitting that, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then I am one of the most consistent posters in there. And so I just kept going with it, even after that half marathon. And so now the guy that runs the group changed it to 5K a day. So he took off the Bay. So now and for whatever reason, I have in my head now, like, okay, got to do a 5K, got to do a 5K, got to do a 5K. So I'll say 5K, but also that Friday run is a 5K. However, the coffee shop doesn't open until 7. So we're done with that. We're done with that 5K in like 35 to 45 minutes. But then people are standing around and it's cold outside. So then a lot of people just add 2 more miles. And so now, like, almost my like favorite distance is 5 miles.
8K. You got to get that 8K in. Just perfect.
8K.
Just finish yourself up. Just, you know, 3/10 of a mile short of 5 miles. You will never care about the Strava tax ever again if you do. All right, Allison, what is your favorite thing to eat post run? Just right, you finish a run, whether it's an easy run or a race, whatever it is. What is your favorite thing to grab to eat, drink? What is it?
Ooh, I've definitely had to learn to rehydrate. And that's huge. So I like rehydrate, and then I really like liquid IV drink mix. And so I would usually have like a cup of that in my car after a run.
All right. And finally,
ice pop.
Go ahead.
Flavor.
Ice coffee.
Ice pop.
All right. And finally, give our listeners a reason to join their local running group.
Reason to join. You won't regret making yourself, holding yourself accountable to other people, I think. And not just them, but now you are part of that community and they are going to check up on you. And that helps you be excited about it and know that you're not alone.
Y'all, I'm telling you, these reasons, if they're not getting you out to your local groups, if they're not getting you on the run, man, I would love to hear what is getting you out and running. But wonderful conversation today. Thank you so much, Allison.
Thank you so much.
Just another amazing story of another amazing runner. Again, you know, I'm not looking oftentimes at those who are setting the pace from the front of the field. I'm looking at the story. I'm looking at the conversation. And this one, especially with Allison, really highlighting her desire for a sense of healthiness, of longevity during the pandemic to bring her out on the other side. You can hear how the journey has become more than just about the running. And so we can see from her journey the way that she has grown, what she has taken from all of these opportunities collectively together, and this story that has developed over the course of her time, and even what it means for her to call herself a runner and to continue to claim that role, that title, that nature. And so amazing story. Again, thank you so much, Allison, for coming and joining us. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. And I know, listeners, that you all have great stories too. And so if you want to share your story, I always have this platform open and available. You can email me, andrew@runninrev.com. It's in the show notes. And there's space for you to tell your story too. Even if you don't think your story is that great and amazing, trust me, it is, because you are a runner, and the community that surrounds you and supports you, that helps to make you the runner that you are. And so love to just share about those kinds of stories. So reach out to me if you'd love to be on the podcast. I am always looking for new guests. I do have a regular rotation. And so, I mean, I do, but I always do have openings. And so feel free to reach out to me. I'd love it if you would also maybe take a moment and support the podcast. Make sure that I'm able to continue to do this work, continue to bring you these episodes, the conversations, all of this stuff. If you want to head over, if you in your podcasting app, if you want to make sure that you are following or subscribing to this podcast, and just make sure that it's right in your feeds as soon as it downloads on Friday mornings. If you want to go to Apple Podcasts or Spotify, if you're on one of those two, and leave a rating and review. On Apple Podcast, you leave it as a review on the whole podcast. If you're in Spotify, you can comment on the episode and leave that support, leave that encouragement as I'm doing this work, so that others can see how much you're enjoying the podcast, have it become a conversation. If you want to support me monetarily, you can go and subscribe on Substack, become a paid Substack, or you can go to Buy Me a Coffee and help support me there. Both those links are in the podcast notes, and so go down and check them out if you are someone who would be able to offer that kind of support to help make sure that I keep these lights on, so to say, and help to keep things going. And just the greatest thing ever is just to share the journey of this podcast, share the journey of a lot of these conversations. Most of all, share your journey. What has made community awesome for you in this journey? Share it with your friends, share it with your community, and help them to see avenues like this that help to continue to explore that communal nature of running. And so y'all have a good week and make every mile count.